I woke up to the sound of chainsaws and heavy machinery on my front lawn, which was never a good sign in the quiet suburb of Maple Ridge, Wisconsin. My name is Stephen Fischer, and I had lived in this peaceful neighborhood for exactly 3 years before the HOA discovered my property existed. I rolled out of bed at 6 in the morning, threw on a robe, and stumbled to my front window expecting to see a city crew fixing a water main or something reasonable. Instead, I saw 4 landscaping trucks, a dozen workers, and what appeared to be massive blocks of ice being unloaded onto my perfectly maintained grass. Standing in the middle of it all was Patricia Whitmore, president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association, clipboard in hand, directing workers like she was conducting an orchestra. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that characteristic severe bun, and even from my bedroom window, I could see the self-satisfied expression on her face. I didn't bother with shoes. I just ran downstairs and burst through my front door. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted across my lawn. Patricia turned to me with a smile that could freeze water faster than the ice blocks scattered across my property. "Good morning, Stephen. We're installing the winter ice sculpture garden. Didn't you get the notice?" "Notice? What notice? And why is it on my lawn?" She consulted her clipboard with exaggerated patience. "We sent an email 2 days ago to all residents on Oakwood Drive. The community voted to have a winter showcase, and your property, being the corner lot with the most visibility, was selected as the ideal location." Selected. You can't just select my property for anything. This is private land. Patricia's smile never wavered. "Actually, according to Section 7.3 of the HOA covenant, the association reserves the right to utilize any front yard space for community beautification projects." "You signed the agreement when you purchased your home." I had signed that agreement, but I had also actually read it, unlike what Patricia apparently assumed. That section specifically states that homeowners must be notified in writing at least 30 days in advance and must provide written consent. An email 2 days ago doesn't cut it. Her smile finally cracked a little. "The email constitutes written notice." "Not according to the covenant, which specifies postal mail, and I never gave consent." One of the workers, a guy in his 20s with a truck logo that read Arctic Dreams Ice Sculptures, approached Patricia. "Madam, where do you want the centerpiece?" "It's a 12-foot replica of the state capitol building." "My grass cannot support 12-foot ice sculptures," I said, my voice rising. "You're going to destroy my lawn. It took me 2 years to get that grass perfect." Patricia waved dismissively. "The installation company assured us they're using protective matting. Your lawn will be fine. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. The grand opening is tonight at 7 and the entire community is invited." "Grand opening, on my property, without my permission." "It's for the community, Stephen. Sometimes we have to think beyond our own selfish interests." That word, selfish, coming from a woman who had turned my front yard into her personal art project without asking, nearly made my head explode. But I took a deep breath and tried a different approach. "Patricia, I'm asking you nicely. Please move this project to the community park. That's what it's there for. The park doesn't have the traffic visibility we need. The HOA board voted unanimously. This is happening." I stood there in my robe and bare feet, watching workers roll massive ice blocks across my lawn, feeling completely powerless. The protective matting Patricia mentioned turned out to be thin plastic sheeting that was already tearing under the weight of the ice. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Richard Morrison, who had helped me with the property purchase 3 years ago. It went to voicemail. Of course it did. It was 6:15 in the morning. "Richard, it's Stephen Fischer." The HOA is literally installing ice sculptures on my front lawn right now without my permission. Call me back immediately." I tried to stand in front of one of the workers, but Patricia summoned 2 more HOA board members I recognized from the monthly meetings I usually avoided. Margaret Chen and Deborah Sutton, both cut from the same cloth as Patricia, formed a human barrier. "You're trespassing on my property," I told them. "We're exercising the HOA's rights under the covenant," Margaret said. She was shorter than Patricia, but somehow more intimidating, with glasses that magnified her judging eyes. "I'm calling the police," I said. "Go ahead," Deborah replied. She was the youngest of the 3, probably in her mid-40s, with an athletic build that suggested she did CrossFit and told everyone about it. "Chief Morrison is a member of our HOA. I'm sure he'll explain the situation to you." Chief Morrison. Related to my lawyer, I made a mental note to ask. I did call the police anyway. A squad car showed up 20 minutes later, driven by Officer Jake Patterson, who I recognized from the neighborhood watch meetings. "Morning, Stephen," Jake said, stepping out of his car. "Got a complaint about trespassing?" "Yes. The HOA is installing ice sculptures on my property without permission." Jake looked at the scene, at Patricia and her clipboard, at the growing collection of ice blocks, and I could see him trying to figure out how to handle this. "Madam," he addressed Patricia, "do you have permission to be on this property?" "We have authorization under the HOA covenant," Patricia said, handing him a printed copy of the relevant section. Jake read it, then looked at me. "Did you sign this when you bought the house?" "Yes, but they're misinterpreting it. It requires 30 days notice and written consent. They sent an email 2 days ago." Jake read the section again more carefully. "It does say written notice by mail 30 days in advance." Patricia's confident expression faltered for just a moment. "The board interpreted email as sufficient written notice." "That's not what the document says," Jake replied. "And I don't see anything here about consent from Mr. Fischer." "We voted as a board," Margaret interjected. "But did Mr. Fischer consent to this specific project on his specific property?" Jake pressed. "We didn't feel individual consent was necessary given the covenant language," Patricia said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Jake looked at me, then at the workers, then back at Patricia. "I think you folks need to pause this project until the legal issues are sorted out. We have a grand opening tonight," Patricia protested. "We've already sent invitations. The mayor is coming." "The mayor can come look at ice sculptures somewhere else," Jake said. "Mr. Fischer, do you want to press trespassing charges?" I thought about it. Pressing charges would make me the neighborhood villain in Patricia's narrative. She'd paint me as the guy who ruined the community's winter celebration. On the other hand, letting this go would signal that the HOA could walk all over me whenever they wanted. "Yes," I said. "I want them off my property and I want to press charges." Patricia's face went from confident to outraged in seconds. "This is absurd. We're trying to do something nice for the community." "Then do it on community property," Jake said. "Madam, I need you and your workers to clear out." The next hour was chaos. Patricia called the other board members. Someone called their lawyer. The ice sculpture company wanted to know if they were getting paid for a partial installation. My grass, where the ice blocks had been sitting, was already turning brown in rectangular patches. My lawyer finally called me back at 7:30. "Stephen, I got your message. What's going on?" I explained the situation while standing on my porch, watching the workers reluctantly pack up their equipment. "They absolutely cannot do this without proper notice and your explicit consent," Richard confirmed. "The covenant is clear. They might have a case if they followed procedure, but it sounds like they didn't. Do you want me to send them a cease and desist?" I think the police already handled it, but yes, send one anyway. I want this documented. Consider it done. I'll also review your HOA covenant to see if there are any other sections they might try to misuse. By 8 o'clock, the workers were gone, but my lawn looked like a disaster zone. The protective matting had torn completely, and the grass underneath was crushed and dying. The spots where the ice blocks had sat were muddy brown rectangles. 3 years of careful lawn maintenance, destroyed in 2 hours. I took photos of everything with my phone, documenting the damage from multiple angles. Patricia approached me one final time before she left. "You've made a very big mistake, Stephen. The HOA has a long memory." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. You've prioritized your own selfish interests over the community's well-being. People will remember that. People will remember that the HOA president tried to illegally commandeer private property," I shot back. "And for what? A vanity project that could have easily gone in the park." She didn't respond, just turned on her heel and walked to her Mercedes. I spent the rest of the day trying to work from home, but I couldn't focus. My home office faced the front yard, and every time I looked out the window, I saw the destroyed grass. I had spent countless weekends aerating, seeding, fertilizing, and nurturing that lawn. Now it looked like a construction site. Around 3 in the afternoon, my neighbor from across the street, Marcus Webb, knocked on my door. He was about my age, early 30s, and we'd had friendly conversations about lawn care before. "Hey man, I saw what happened this morning," he said. "That was insane. Tell me about it." "Look, I'm on your side here, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia's going nuclear. She's been calling everyone in the neighborhood, telling them you ruined the winter celebration because you're antisocial and don't care about community values." Of course she is. Some people are buying it. The Hendersons, the Crafts, a few others. But most people think what she did was wrong. You can't just take over someone's property. Thanks for letting me know. Also, I heard her tell Margaret that they're going ahead with the grand opening tonight anyway. They're moving it to the community park, but she's planning to blame you publicly for the location change. Let her. I have photos of what she did to my lawn. Marcus hesitated. There's something else. I overheard her say something about teaching you a lesson about community participation. I don't know what that means, but it sounded vindictive. After Marcus left, I sat on my couch, trying to decide my next move. I could go to the grand opening and defend myself publicly, but that seemed like playing into Patricia's hands. She wanted a confrontation. She wanted to paint me as the villain in front of the entire neighborhood. My phone buzzed with an email. It was from the HOA, sent to all residents. "Dear Maple Ridge community members, due to unforeseen complications with a selfish homeowner who refused to participate in our community beautification project, tonight's ice sculpture garden grand opening has been relocated to Riverside Park. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. Remember, a strong community requires everyone to do their part. Some members clearly don't understand this principle. The event will still begin at 7 p.m. Please join us in celebrating our community spirit, even in the face of obstruction from those who don't share our values." The email wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Patricia's voice dripped from every word. I forwarded it to Richard, my lawyer, with a note. "Is this defamatory?" he called me 5 minutes later. "It's borderline. She's not naming you specifically, but everyone will know who she means." The problem is proving damages. Has this harmed you financially or professionally? Not yet, but it's only been a few hours. Document everything. Save every email, every interaction. If this escalates, we might have grounds for harassment or a defamation claim. I didn't go to the grand opening. Instead, I stayed home, ordered pizza, and watched through my window as car after car drove past my house toward the park. Some people slowed down to look at my torn-up lawn. A few took pictures. Around 9 o'clock, my doorbell rang. It was Linda Parker, an older woman who lived 2 houses down. She had always been kind to me, bringing over cookies during the holidays. "Stephen, dear, I wanted to check on you," she said. "I heard what happened this morning. News travels fast. Patricia made sure of it. But I want you to know that not everyone believes her version of events. What she did was wrong. You can't just take over someone's property." "Thank you, Linda. That means a lot. Be careful, though. Patricia doesn't handle opposition well." When the Kramers complained about the new fence regulations last year, she made their lives miserable. Constant violation notices, fines for the tiniest infractions, surprise property inspections. They ended up moving. "She can't force me out of my house." "Maybe not, but she can make you wish you'd never stayed." Linda's warning echoed in my head after she left. I had heard stories about HOA horror stories, but I had never experienced one firsthand. My previous interactions with the Maple Ridge HOA had been minimal. I paid my dues, kept my property maintained, and avoided the politics. That strategy had worked fine until today. I spent the evening researching HOA laws in Wisconsin, reading through my covenant document with fresh eyes, and preparing for whatever Patricia might try next. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I woke up to find a violation notice attached to my front door. It was printed on official HOA letterhead and detailed multiple infractions. Damaged lawn in violation of community aesthetic standards, Section 12.4. Unsightly brown patches visible from street, Section 12.4b. And failure to maintain property in accordance with community standards, Section 12.1. Each violation carried a $50 per day fine until corrected. I called Richard immediately. "They're fining me for the damage they caused to my lawn," I told him. "You have photos from before this morning showing the lawn was fine." "I have photos from yesterday after they left, showing the damage their ice sculpture installation caused." "Perfect. Send those to me. I'll draft a response. They can't fine you for damage they caused." "How do I fight the fines?" The covenant should have a dispute resolution process. Usually there's a hearing procedure. In the meantime, don't pay anything. Paying could be construed as admitting the violations. The next week was exhausting. I received violation notices every single day. On Tuesday, I got cited for mailbox at improper angle, Section 8.2. My mailbox hadn't moved in 3 years. On Wednesday, it was trash bins visible from street outside of collection hours, Section 9.7. I had put my bins out Tuesday night for Wednesday morning collection, same as I did every week. Thursday brought vehicle parked in driveway facing wrong direction, Section 11.3. My car was parked the same way it had been parked for 3 years. Each violation came with a $50 per day fine. I photographed everything and sent it all to Richard. I also started documenting my neighbors' properties. The Hendersons had their trash bins visible from the street. The Crafts' mailbox was at the same angle as mine. Half the driveways on the street had cars parked the same direction as mine. Patricia was targeting me specifically, and she wasn't being subtle about it. The formal hearing for the violation disputes was scheduled for 2 weeks after the ice sculpture incident. The HOA board would hear my appeal, which was like asking the fox to guard the henhouse, but it was the process outlined in the covenant. In the meantime, I had my lawn to deal with. I called a landscaping company to assess the damage and give me a repair estimate. The landscaper, a guy named Tom who had been in the business for 20 years, walked my front yard, examined the dead grass patches, and shook his head. "This is going to be expensive," he said. "The weight of whatever was sitting here compressed the soil. We'll need to aerate, possibly replace some soil, reseed, and then maintain it carefully for several weeks. In this cold weather, the grass won't take until spring. You're looking at about $3,000, and that's if we start now and finish in April. $3,000. Could be more if the soil damage is worse than it looks. Want me to write up a formal estimate?" "Yes, please. Be detailed." Tom's estimate arrived via email that evening. It was thorough with photos, measurements, and a breakdown of costs. I forwarded it to Richard. "This is good," Richard said when he called. "We can pursue damages against the HOA for the illegal installation. $3,000 plus your time, distress, and possibly punitive damages for their retaliation campaign. I just want them to leave me alone." "I understand, but they're not going to. Patricia sees this as a war now. We need to make it clear that there are consequences for her actions." The hearing was held in the community center conference room on a cold Tuesday evening in late January. The room was set up like a courtroom, with a long table at the front where Patricia, Margaret, and Deborah sat. There were chairs for observers, and about 15 neighbors showed up, probably expecting drama. I sat at a small table facing the board, with Richard beside me. Patricia called the meeting to order with a gavel, which seemed excessive. "We're here to address the multiple violations filed against the property at 847 Oakwood Drive, owned by Stephen Fischer. Mr. Fischer has disputed these violations. Mr. Fischer, you may present your case." Richard stood. "Thank you. We're here to address what is clearly a pattern of retaliatory harassment by this board. Mr. Fischer had 0 violations in 3 years of residence, until he objected to the illegal installation of ice sculptures on his property. Since that date, he has received 14 violation notices, all for conditions that either don't exist or are identical to other properties that have not been cited." "That's a serious accusation," Margaret said. "It's a factual observation," Richard replied. "We have photographic evidence that the alleged mailbox angle violation is identical to 6 other mailboxes on the same street. The trash bin violation occurred during the normal collection window, when multiple neighbors had bins visible. The lawn damage that prompted the first violations was caused by the HOA's own actions. The lawn violation exists regardless of cause," Patricia interjected. "Section 12.4 requires all lawns to meet community aesthetic standards." Section 12.4 also includes subsection D, which exempts damage caused by circumstances beyond the homeowner's control. The HOA's illegal installation qualifies. This went on for an hour. Richard systematically dismantled each violation with photos, citations from the covenant, and evidence of selective enforcement. The board members became increasingly defensive. Finally, Patricia had enough. "Mr. Morrison, we appreciate your interpretation of the covenant, but this board has the authority to enforce standards as we see fit." "Actually, you don't," Richard said. "The covenant is a legal contract. You can't enforce it selectively or in bad faith. What you're doing could be considered harassment under Wisconsin law." "Are you threatening us?" Deborah asked. "I'm informing you of the legal reality. If this harassment continues, we'll pursue civil action for damages, including the cost of repairing the lawn, compensation for Mr. Fischer's time and distress, and potentially punitive damages for bad faith enforcement." The room went quiet. Some of the observing neighbors whispered to each other. Patricia recovered first. "This board will take your appeal under advisement. We'll notify you of our decision within 10 business days. We'll also expect a response regarding the lawn repair costs," Richard added. The HOA is liable for damage caused by its illegal actions. We left the community center, and I felt like I had just been through a battle. How do you think it went? I asked Richard. Hard to say. They're backed into a corner. They can either admit they were wrong, which people like Patricia hate doing, or they can double down and face a lawsuit they'll lose. What do you think they'll do? Double down. People like Patricia always do. He was right. The decision letter arrived 8 days later. The board upheld all 14 violations. The fines now totaled over $4,000, and I had 30 days to pay or face a lien on my property. Richard filed a lawsuit the next day in Dane County Circuit Court. We sued the HOA for trespassing, property damage, harassment, and bad faith enforcement of the covenant. We asked for actual damages, punitive damages, and attorney's fees. The lawsuit became the talk of the neighborhood. I got supportive messages from some neighbors and hostile glares from others when I checked my mail. Someone left a note on my car calling me a community destroyer. Another note, from an anonymous supporter, encouraged me to fight the tyranny. My life became consumed by the legal battle. Depositions, document requests, interrogatories. Richard assured me we had a strong case, but the process was grueling. Meanwhile, Patricia continued her campaign. She organized a petition to recall me from the community, even though there was no mechanism for that in the covenant. She held a meeting about dealing with problem homeowners. She even contacted my employer, a marketing firm in Madison, to express concerns about my character. That last one crossed a line. My boss, Jennifer, called me into her office on a Friday afternoon in early February. "Stephen, I got a strange call today from someone named Patricia Whitmore. She said she was concerned about your behavior in your neighborhood. Want to tell me what's going on?" I explained the entire situation. Jennifer listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "So let me get this straight. The HOA damaged your property, then tried to fine you for the damage, and when you pushed back, they started harassing you. That's the short version. And now they're calling your workplace to what? Try to get you fired, apparently." Jennifer shook her head. "That's insane. For what it's worth, I told her this was none of my business unless it affected your work performance, which it hasn't. But you might want to document that call as part of your lawsuit." "I will. Thank you for understanding. I've dealt with HOAs before. Some of them are run by petty tyrants. Good luck with your case." I told Richard about Patricia's call to my employer. He was furious. "That's tortious interference with employment," he said. "We can amend the complaint to include that. This woman is digging herself deeper every day." The lawsuit was scheduled for a preliminary hearing in March. Both sides would present their basic arguments, and the judge would decide if there was enough merit to proceed to trial. But something happened in late February that changed everything. I came home from work on a Thursday evening to find my front lawn covered in ice sculptures. Not the professional ones from before, but dozens of crude ice sculptures, clearly homemade, scattered across my damaged grass. They were melting in the 40-degree weather, turning my lawn into a muddy, icy mess. And standing in the middle of it all, directing several teenagers who were unloading more ice blocks from a truck, was Patricia. I pulled out my phone and started recording before I even got out of my car. "Patricia, what are you doing?" I called out, walking toward my lawn. She turned to me with that same self-satisfied smile from the first day. "Community art project. We're reclaiming this space for the neighborhood." "You're trespassing on my property. Again. This is a community statement." "You can't stop progress, Stephen. I have a restraining order being filed tomorrow specifically to keep you off my property. You're on camera right now, trespassing and causing more damage." One of the teenagers, a kid who looked about 16, suddenly looked nervous. Mrs. Whitmore, I thought you said this was your property. It's complicated, Patricia told him. Keep working. No, stop working, I said. You're on private property without permission. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police. Call them, Patricia said. They know this is a community matter. I called 911 while still recording. I need police at 847 Oakwood Drive. I have trespassers on my property who are refusing to leave and causing property damage. The same officer, Jake Patterson, showed up within 10 minutes. This time, he brought a sergeant with him. Mr. Fischer, Jake said, stepping out of his car. Same problem as before. Exactly the same problem, except now she's brought teenagers to help. Jake approached Patricia, who was now looking less confident. Madam, we've been through this before. This is private property. You need to leave. This is a community matter, Patricia insisted, but her voice wavered. The sergeant, a tall man with gray hair whose nameplate read Collins, stepped forward. Madam, you're trespassing. You need to remove these ice sculptures and leave the property immediately. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here. You have no authority on private property without the owner's permission, Sergeant Collins said. You have two choices. Leave voluntarily or we arrest you for trespassing. The teenagers were already backing away toward the truck. One of them said, Mrs. Whitmore, my mom is going to kill me. You said this was legal. It is legal, Patricia insisted, but she was clearly losing control of the situation. Madam, last chance, Sergeant Collins said. Leave now or face arrest. Patricia looked at me, at the officers, at the teenagers who were climbing into the truck, and finally at the melting ice sculptures on my lawn. This isn't over, she said. Actually, it is, I replied. You're on camera committing criminal trespassing. That's going into evidence. She left, but not before giving me a look of pure hatred. After everyone was gone, I surveyed the damage. My lawn was even worse than before, now covered in muddy ice water and chunks of melting sculptures. I took extensive photos and videos, then called Richard. She did it again. He asked, incredulous, on camera. I have video of the entire thing, including the police telling her to leave. This is better than I could have hoped for, legally speaking. We can now add criminal trespassing to the complaint. The judge is going to crucify her. I just want to fix my lawn and be left alone. You will be. After this, there's no way she survives as HOA president, and we're going to make sure you're compensated for all of this. The video of Patricia's second trespassing incident went viral in the neighborhood. Someone, probably one of the teenagers, posted about it on social media. And suddenly, everyone was talking about the crazy HOA president who kept trespassing. The preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks later. Richard presented our case, including the video evidence of both trespassing incidents, documentation of the retaliatory violations, and evidence of Patricia's call to my employer. The HOA's lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Gerald Foster, tried to argue that this was a community matter and that the covenant gave the HOA broad authority. Judge Catherine Reynolds, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, was not impressed. Counsel, I've reviewed the covenant, she said. There is no provision that allows the HOA to trespass on private property without proper notice and consent. The notice and consent requirements are explicit. Your client violated them twice, on camera. Do you have any legal argument for why this case should be dismissed? Gerald stammered through a response about community standards and good faith efforts at beautification, but even he seemed to know it was hopeless. Judge Reynolds ruled in our favor. This case will proceed to trial. However, given the video evidence of repeated trespassing and what appears to be a pattern of retaliatory behavior, I'm issuing a preliminary injunction. The HOA, and specifically Mrs. Patricia Whitmore are prohibited from contacting Mr. Fischer directly, entering his property, or issuing any additional violation notices unless they can demonstrate legitimate, non-retaliatory grounds. Violation of this injunction will result in contempt charges. Patricia's face went pale when the judge said contempt charges. Outside the courthouse, Richard was triumphant. That was about as good as we could have hoped for. The judge clearly sees through their nonsense. What happens now? We prepare for trial. But honestly, I expect them to settle. No jury is going to side with them after watching those videos. Richard was right. 3 weeks later, the HOA's lawyer contacted him with a settlement offer. The HOA would pay for all lawn repairs, drop all violation notices and fines, pay my attorney's fees, and issue a formal apology. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue punitive damages. It's a good offer, Richard said. You'd be made whole and you'd be free of this mess. What about Patricia? That's internal HOA politics, but I suspect she won't survive this as president. I accepted the settlement. The apology letter arrived a week later, signed by all 3 board members. It was stiff and formal, but it acknowledged that they had exceeded their authority and caused undue hardship to me. It didn't feel like enough, but it was something. The lawn repair happened in April, once the weather was warm enough for grass to grow. The landscaping company Tom did excellent work. By May, my front yard looked better than it ever had before, but the real satisfaction came from the HOA itself. Linda Parker knocked on my door in late May with news. "Stephen, I thought you'd want to know. Patricia resigned as HOA president. Margaret and Deborah are gone too. The entire board resigned after an emergency member meeting." What happened? Once word got out about the settlement and what they'd done, members started asking questions. Turns out the ice sculpture project was never properly budgeted. Patricia spent about $15,000 of HOA funds without proper authorization. Combined with your settlement, which cost another $20,000, the HOA is in serious financial trouble. Members voted to dissolve the current board and elect new leadership. Who's the new president? Marcus Webb. He's promising a complete overhaul of how the HOA operates. More transparency, no vanity projects, and strict adherence to the covenant rules. I reached out to Marcus a few days later to congratulate him. He invited me over for coffee. "I wanted to thank you," Marcus said as we sat on his back deck. "I know this whole thing was a nightmare for you, but it exposed how corrupt and petty the old board was. Patricia ran this HOA like her personal fiefdom. She needed to go. I just wanted to protect my property. And you did. But you also made it possible for the rest of us to take back our community. We're implementing new rules. Any community project has to be approved by a majority vote of all members, not just the board. No more surprise installations. No more selective enforcement. And absolutely no retaliation against members who voice concerns. Sounds like a much better system. It will be. We're also looking into Patricia's finances more closely. Some of the expenses she authorized don't add up. We might need to pursue legal action if we find actual fraud." I didn't hear much about Patricia after that. She stopped coming to neighborhood events. Her house went up for sale in July. The rumor was that she and her husband were moving to Arizona, far away from Wisconsin and the neighborhood she had tried to control. My life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after a months-long legal battle with my HOA. I kept my head down, maintained my beautiful lawn, and avoided HOA politics. But something interesting happened in September. Marcus knocked on my door with a proposal. "Stephen, the board wants to know if you'd be interested in joining as a member. We could use someone who actually understands the covenant and isn't afraid to stand up for what's right." "I don't know. The last thing I want is more HOA drama. I get it, but think about it. You could help make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. I did think about it. For several days, I wrestled with the decision. Did I want to spend my free time in HOA meetings? Did I want that responsibility? Finally, I decided that yes, I did, because Marcus was right. The best way to prevent future abuse was to be part of the solution. I joined the HOA board in October. My first meeting was surreal, sitting at the same table where Patricia had once wielded her gavel and clipboard like weapons. The new board was different. We focused on actual community needs, routine maintenance, reasonable standards. We treated homeowners with respect. When disputes arose, we listened to all sides before making decisions. In December, almost a year after the ice sculpture incident, the board proposed a winter community celebration. This time, it would be in Riverside Park, where it belonged. We sent proper notices 30 days in advance. We asked for volunteers. We created a budget and presented it to the membership for approval. The event was a success. Families came out to see modest ice sculptures created by local artists. There were hot chocolate and cookies. Kids played in the snow. It was everything a community event should be. No property violations or trespassing required. As I stood in the park, watching neighbors enjoy themselves, I thought about the previous year. The stress, the legal battles, the damage to my lawn and my peace of mind. It had been terrible, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes standing up to bullies, even HOA bullies with clipboards and covenants, is the only way to create real change. Patricia had seen my property as just another piece of her domain to control. She had forgotten that homeowners have rights, that communities are built on mutual respect, not unilateral authority. I had reminded her of that fact. It had cost me time, money, and stress, but in the end, it had been worth it. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard, my lawyer, who had become a friend through the ordeal. Saw the pics from the community event. Looks great. How does it feel to be on the board? I texted back, surprisingly good. Turns out when you run an HOA with common sense and respect for people, it's actually kind of rewarding. Who would have thought? He replied with a laughing emoji. Who would have thought indeed? As the winter celebration wrapped up and families headed home, Marcus came over to where I was standing. Good turnout, he said. Really good. This is what community should be. I heard from the Jennings family that they're thinking about installing a pool next summer. They wanted to know the process for getting approval. Did you send them the covenant section on property modifications? I did. I also told them we'd work with them to make sure everything is done properly. No surprises, no gotcha moments. That's how it should work. Marcus nodded. You know, a year ago, people were scared to even ask the board questions. Patricia had created this atmosphere of fear. You changed that. We changed it, I corrected. It took all of us. As I drove home that night, past my perfectly restored lawn, past neighbors' houses decorated with tasteful holiday lights, past the community I had fought to make better, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. The ice sculpture garden Patricia had tried to force onto my lawn was long gone, melted by my sprinklers and by time. But the lessons from that conflict remained. Homeowners have rights. HOAs have limits. And sometimes, the only way to defend a community is to stand up to those who claim to represent it. My lawn looked beautiful in the moonlight. Every blade of grass, a small victory. I had spent $3,000 and countless hours restoring it, but it was worth every penny and every minute. It was my property, my home, and no HOA president with a clipboard and an inflated sense of authority would ever take that from me again. I parked in my driveway, facing the same direction I had always parked, and smiled. Tomorrow I would get up, go to work, come home and enjoy my property in peace. No violation notices, no surprise installations, no drama, just a quiet house on a quiet street in Maple Ridge, Wisconsin, exactly as it should be. The story of the HOA ice sculpture garden had a happy ending, but not because everything magically worked out. It had a happy ending because I had stood my ground, documented everything, sought legal help, and refused to be bullied. And in the process, I had helped create a better community for everyone. As I unlocked my front door and stepped inside, I made a mental note to call the landscaper in the spring. With proper maintenance, my lawn would be even better next year. And this time, no ice sculptures would threaten it. The HOA could hold all the winter celebrations it wanted, in all the appropriate locations with all the proper authorizations. That was fine with me. I would probably even attend some of them. But my lawn, my beautiful, hard-fought, perfectly maintained lawn was mine, and it would stay that way.